Hi everyone, I would like to introduce our next speaker is Matt Sharpe, Creative Director at Zynga with the topic capital E, crafting mobile ad creatives optimized for performance. Matt,
Thank you very much, Stacy. I am Matt Sharpe, and I'm the creative director in advertising at Zynga. We are a mobile gaming company who have the privilege of entertaining over 200 million gamers across the world. And today, my hope is to entertain you just a little. Now, this presentation is entitled Capital P, Crafting Mobile Ad Creatives Optimized for Performance. Capital P. So, kind of a so-so title on my part. I could do a little better there, but I promise you this presentation, it only gets better. Now, in terms of how we're going to do this, what I plan to do is I plan to barrel through this from start to finish. And then as this presentation concludes, I'll take a look. If there's any questions, I will do my best to answer them as best I can. Now, in terms of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to start at the basics of our design philosophy. Anytime we, as an internal studio, are tasked to generate mobile ad assets, what I'd like to do is I want to start at our design philosophy, and I want to tell the story all the way through to execution. So starting very high level and then getting gradually more granular as to the how and the why we execute these ads the way we do. In terms of who might benefit from this and who might enjoy this, well, number one, anyone who works on a team that frequently engages with creative partners, I think could take something out of this just from a sheer empathy standpoint. To understand how we do things, how we process things, it can only help in your own dealings. Two, creatives. I know that, a lot of this may seem familiar to some creatives, some not, but it always helps, from my experience, to take a quick look through the window at another studio and to hear these things. Because sometimes, if you're anything like me, you can know something, but you need to be kind of refreshed on it every once in a while because it's very easy to get out of those productive habits. And lastly, if you don't fall into either of these buckets, like let's say you just clicked a link looking for a random MBA score and you ended up here, I'm happy to have you. And I'm going to do my best to entertain you and educate you in the same way. I mean, you could be anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. Now, let's get started. Speaking of appreciation, we have a deep appreciation for the basics, the fundamentals. This is where we establish the foundation for every design decision that is to follow. Now, the first step of this, it's the first step of any project we take on. Define your KPIs. KPIs, key performance indicators. We take a crazy amount of time ensuring everyone involved in the project, from the top to the bottom, to the left, to the right, from side to side, sashaying around, knows exactly why we're here and why we're producing this creative. The reason being, we have to know if this ad is successful later. And I've had times in my career where I've produced ads that have looked great. People loved it. The creative was strong, it was funny, it was whimsical, it was clever. And unfortunately, it fell flat on its face doing what it was supposed to do. So you can have something that looks beautiful, but fails because it doesn't meet the KPIs. Conversely, you can have something that doesn't look particularly creative, however, over indexes on those same KPIs. So having that level of familiarity burned in right from the start is critically important. Now, our common KPIs when we're producing these mobile ads, I imagine might be similar to yours. Now, they can be engagement, which is a key one, awareness, purchase intent, click-through rate, and conversions. And how we structure the ad, every decision we make from here on out is predicated on the foundation of these elements. So whether it's conversions, purchase intent, every decision we make rests on that KPI. And then once we have that KPI, we can go into the elements themselves. Now, what I mean by that are the on-screen elements that will compose the ad. So that could be a product shot, that could be a call to action, that could be the romance copy, the value proposition, all these things. What we do is we take a look and we say, okay, in order to execute on this key performance indicator, what do we really need? Now, one example might be, imagine if we are advertising, I'm going to go off the range here. Imagine we have like this artisan sweater company, okay? And they make beautiful sweaters made of, I don't know, merino, wool, corduroy, cashmere, cotton, some kind of newfound mix of all those. What we'll do is we'll say, all right, clearly we got to have a product shot. The product is a differentiator. We got to show people right off the bat. That's going to be a key thing. All right, we're going to have a product. Then we're going to have maybe a little bit of copy tying on all the elements that they see. Okay. And then after that, what else do we really need? Conversely, we may have another project where we need to advertise, say, let's say USB sticks. Okay. So you think of USB sticks, they can look very sleek. They can look very nice. However, at a glance, you can't always identify key traits such as storage, speed, things like that. So in that case, we're probably going to be focusing on value proposition. We're going to be including the one or two things that we can really call out. So it's all of these elements that we bring into the mix based on our KPIs and asking ourselves, do they absolutely need to be there? Now, as an analogy, this past holiday season, I crushed all 3 seasons of Emily in Paris. Emily in Paris on Netflix. It's a great show, okay? And I thought, what if my KPI was to explain to people why Emily in Paris is well worth their time? Okay, in terms of words I might include in a very brief explanation, what are the words that have to be there? So I thought of words like Emily, Paris, job, transfer, love, fashion, city, beautiful, fun. Now, you'll notice there are other words, and if you're familiar with Emily in Paris, you're probably kind of having a chuckle seeing them, like Champère, Camille, Savoir, Ringard, Normandy, and air conditioning. That can be very critical to the story, but don't really need to be there when I'm trying to sell people on it. So again, it's dividing up the elements we're going to use: copy, images, call to action, those things as the key parts, and then putting everything else off to the side. Then when we have those elements, we prioritize them. I talked earlier about the example of the product shot. If you're selling something artisan, if you're promoting something or a key value proposition, that and/or a representation of that has got to be the key priority element showcased to users. So we will go through, and you'll notice at this point, we have an open Photoshop, we have an open Figma. If people get frustrated because they're like, okay, we got to go check all these boxes, but this lays the blueprint so we can do purpose-driven design later. But with this element defined, what we do is with our elements, we assign them priorities. Okay, product shot, you're P1. Call to action, maybe in some cases you're P3. If we're looking at conversions, that call to action, that's P1. We go through to make sure that we're making the best decisions possible later in the process from a design standpoint. And I note here, we pause at 3 items. I mean, to be honest, 3 is my lucky number. So I like to look at creatives, whether doesn't matter whether they're designing for banners, static interstitials, whatever the case may be. 3 is a really good number for the user to engage with because it allows them to see multiple items without feeling overwhelmed. You can communicate using 3, and that's just the number I stop at. So at this stage, we've got our basics laid out. We've got that foundation. We've got our KPIs. We've got the elements we're going to use, the ingredients of our recipe, and we've established the priority of all those elements. Now we can open up Photoshop, Figma, whatever your weapon of choice is, and we can start to get tactical. And for the first step, I want to talk about banners. Okay, now, whether we're talking 320 by 50, 300 by 50, 300 by 250, I could go through a lot of numbers and a lot of different formats. But in general, a lot of what I'm going to talk about applies to each of them. And that is this. With banners, we have one rule. You say little and you act big, okay? You don't have a lot of space to operate. Now, I know I'm speaking to the obvious, but sometimes I need to remind clients as well as ourselves internally that, I mean, a proper analogy would be, say, an apartment. You get one of those like big city apartments, that's like a single bachelor pad, and it's like a 6 by 6 room. So it's a 6x6 room. You don't have a lot of space in there. So you can't jam a lot of things in. So in that situation, as in this situation with banners, you want to be asking, what's your one big thing? If the user were to take one thing from this ad unit, what would it be? This is where we go back to the priority list. Okay, what was the P1 element? What was the priority element that needed to be showcased? We're going to highlight that. Every design decision we make will emphasize that element. Now, going back to the analogy, we got that 6x6 room. It's small, but it's ours. Okay, it's very nice. You might look at that and say, okay, I'm going to need a place to sit. That's my main thing. I need a place to sleep. That's big. A love seat. Beautiful. You can sleep on a love seat. Not super comfortable. You can have people over, but you can have that love seat in. Now, typically at this point, that's when people want to introduce more things, more elements. Okay, I know the one big thing. What else can we add? Can we add a lamp? I want to have a lamp. I want to have light. We can do that. I want to have a side table. It'd be great to rest my coffee on something. Cool. We can do that too. And how about a dresser or a closet or something of that order? Sure. The key distinction, everything that you add dilutes from the focus of that primary P1 element. Every single item you add cuts down on that focus. So thinking back to the room, and I use this with clients a lot, yes, you can add a closet. Technically, you do have the space. You can add all these things. You can add it into this tight little 6x6 space. But imagine opening the door to that space. Imagine what that it looked like an episode of Hoarders. You got things stacked up all over the place. That's not welcoming. That's not inviting. That's not a good conversation. Conversely, imagine engaging with that. Imagine walking through that room with things stacked up. You're kind of dancing all around. There's tension. It's not good. So we focus on that one big thing, and then we highly selectively branch out in this tight space. As an example, on the left, this is what we get a lot of. We get logo, value proposition, fairly extended, big call to action, and a product shot, full frame. Ask yourself, where did your eye go when you saw that? What was the most important thing? You look at a situation like this, there's multiple elements at play, and they're all roughly the same size. Here's one big rule that we follow. When everything is big, when everything is loud, nothing is loud. Everything kind of falls into itself. You don't really understand what the priority is. Click here for what? Value prop. No. Contrast that with the example on the right. What's the first thing you noticed? And the second thing, it's much cleaner. It's much more efficient. We don't need a call to action. We found people just naturally know, okay, a banner, I can tap on that. Even if it's just an awareness play, this could be effective. So 2 examples here, each showcasing the principle. What's your one big thing? And then selectively adding things in based on the priorities defined earlier. Now then, let's get into statics. So by static interstitials, we're talking, full screen, something that's going to take up the screen. You've got more real estate. You're not constrained to this 320 by 50 space. I mean, going back to that apartment analogy, you've moved on up. You don't have that 6x6 room anymore. Now it's 12 by 12. So of course, what's the temptation? Let's add more. We'll shove more in. Hey, that side table I wanted, that's going to be in there. The lamp that you told me was too busy before, we're going to put it in. And the closet, I'm going to have 2 of them. Okay. One rule to remember, just because you have the space does not mean you need to fill it up. And I say that and creatives nod their heads and they're like, yeah, tell me about it. Tell that to the client. Honestly, ask yourself how you're communicating that to the client. Again, I find this apartment analogy to be apt and appropriate. From our experience as well, when we leverage focused and restrained presentation of items, we dramatically outperform units where there's tension because of multiple frantic layout, things being stretched to their edges, things being maximized to fill in space. So all that leads to one key driving principle when we look at these statics, and that is space drives contrast and contrast drives focus. Design fundamental, but it needs to be said again, space drives contrast and contrast drives focus. When you have 1, 2, maybe 3 elements in a room, they all look important. They have a priority. There's an order to it. There's a harmony to it. When you have 7, not so great. So keep in mind, even though you have that additional space here, what's that one big thing? What's that P1 element? And how does everything else cascade down from there? An example. Now, on the left is, and here's the thing, I could have gone crazy. And I think if you're watching this and you've worked with creatives and you've seen these ads, you know how these can get. I could have stretched things out way more. I could have used a way more exaggerated example. Like you think about the gyms that advertise the before and the after. The before shot is somebody in this like really dimly lit room with their shirt off, looking, really small and, well, not small ever, and bad lighting and paste. It's not good. Okay, and then they have the after where it's just perfect lighting and everyone's bronzed and like flexing with their stomach sucked in. This on the left truly is a lot of what we get. There's real margins there. That's not an exaggeration. Somebody designed that. There's margins. They're just maximizing the space. That's a very appropriate ad. However, again, compare the personality types of these two ads. In one, everything's maxed out. Everything's loud. Everything's big. On the right, structured. It's ordered. There's a harmony to it. Again, when everything is loud, nothing is loud. There may be some titles where you want that tension. There may be some titles where you need to have that. You want to create that. The truth is, though, from our experience, people don't follow through. They don't engage. They don't convert. They don't engage meaningfully. They don't convert when they feel that tension, when they feel balled up, when they've been pushed to an action. It's almost like they've been conned into it. Now, those are statics. So we've had banners, and we've had static interstitials. We've gone through the principles of it, everything. At this point, we've had our 6x6 space. We moved on up to that 12x12. When we get into playables and interactive, this is something we have been doing for a long time at Zynga, which is great because we've had the good fortune of running a lot of very successful campaigns, as well as less successful campaigns at times as the market has changed around us. And so we've learned a lot. And the one thing with playables and with interactive is there's this temptation. If you think you have that 12x12 space before, you think you had expansion, you have multiple rooms at play. This is like you've got a 12x12 room, you've got a 6x6 room. You can tell a story here. This is where people get their creative juices flowing. They storyboard things out. The playable is going to work like this. And I know most are familiar with playables, but if you're not, an ad within, a game within the game, a mini game an ad that plays like a mini game, any kind of interactive unit, there's that tendency towards we're going to storyboard it, and then this will happen, and then the big reveal, because in theory, you've got a lot more room to fill up. You've got a lot more runway. In practice, though, you still don't have the luxury of patience. You still need to count on that same attention span that focused on that tiny 320x50 ad and the static interstitial that followed. Okay? Not everyone is going to be there for the journey. And we've had times where we've had to stop people and say, I understand you want to reveal the product only when the user wins, but the user doesn't always win and the user doesn't always get that far. So let's get in front of it. Again, what's the P1 element to hit our KPIs? Now, I mentioned that we've been doing this for a while. Example on the left, this is what we could have gotten away with in 2016. Okay, we came up, we had a product shot. This was our intro card. We had a branded product shot with all this copy. Hey, this isn't a usual ad. This isn't normal. No, this is a game. In fact, you can play this game. In fact, all you need to do to play this game is pressing that button beneath. That's what we did. That was our gate. And it was successful because people weren't used to it yet. If we ran with that format today, we would fall flat on our faces and we would not do very, very well. Conversely, what you'd see more from us now, less from a content standpoint, more from a design, is the example on the right. This is where things are just out and upfront right from the start. Save the world. What? Tap the enemies to shoot. Enemies? What enemies? Oh, there's my Burgertron Weaponizer 3000. I'll use that. We go for that quick cognitive catch. Now, the reason why we've done this, attention spans, as you see with hyper casual, hyper casual, and things like that, getting smaller, 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 smaller. And so as a result, we piece together 3 design pillars. Whenever we're working on playables or interactive units, we have 3 pillars of design. Number 1, immediacy. We have got to get the user into the challenge or environment ASAP. We cannot afford to say to them, hey, I might have a cool game for you. You want to play that game? The only exception to this is if we have something, typically I'll say it's from a talent standpoint. If we're working with studios or clients who have celebrity talent they want to show right from the start, we'll either do an overlay, or if we have to do the card, we'll do it, but it'll autoplay, it'll fade away after X number of seconds just for the user to have that oomph, that impact of recognition. But ultimately, we cannot wait to reveal the game environment. We have got to get it in front of the user ASAP so they can see it and immerse themselves in it. 2, simplicity. Once the user's in that environment, they need to know how to operate within it. Now, in the example before, I mentioned tap the enemies to shoot. We still sometimes use copy because some clients prefer it, and we try to make it as short as possible. In fact, here, I don't think that would even make it to production. We'd probably be like tap to shoot, and then we'd have a hand going over top. Speaking of which, if we can get away with it, we won't even have copy. We'll just have the hand. We'll just show everything with the hand, okay? Because we need to keep the instructions as simple as possible. And last, urgency. We need to ensure that the design elements that we use foster a sense of urgency at every turn. How do we do that? One way, we show immediately the effects of a lack of engagement. Maybe the character is suffering. Maybe the danger is only increasing. We really ramp home that engagement is needed now if you, the user, to complete this task. Additionally, we have challenge prompts. And this is where if we're working with talent, they can be on-screen overlays that are introduced, but really quick, punchy, non-disruptive text prompts saying things like, keep going, you can do it, you got this. We do that to keep the user hooked, to let them know that this is an actual event. They haven't been given a task and then the teacher walks out of the room. There's someone right there saying, I need your help, and we got to do this. Lastly, we use a lot of animation. I talked earlier about the cursor. We'll use things like red, pulsating glows on the edges of the screen. If we do have copy, it comes in with impact quickly. It's just creating this sense that the user has to move right now. And so going through it again and looking at this example with the Burgertron Weaponizer 9000 or whatever I called it. By the way, if you create this game, if you create Burgertron 9000 3D and it hits, Zynga gets like 20%. All right. We got with I'm sure there's some implicit contract here. I'm no lawyer, but it's got to be. But again, you look at that and it's boom. Here's the environment. The world's in danger. What? The world's in danger? We need you. This is how you save it. Okay. And by the way, if you don't start saving it, things start falling apart. So again, 3-step process to any interactive or playable unit: immediacy, simplicity, and urgency. Speaking of urgency, 24 minutes or so in, I know we're wrapping this up. And so I'm going to wind things down here because I have a sense of urgency out of respect for your time. Let's get to the meat of it. What I like to do always is leave behind a one-sheeter, a cheat sheet. This is how we go from start to finish. This is our approach from common to contextual. Number 1, we spend a crazy amount of time defining our KPIs. Everyone who is involved in this project should know how we're going to know if this is a success. Is it engagement rate? Is it click through? Whatever the case may be. Number 2, with that in mind, we move on to the elements. Okay, we know what we have to do. What are the tools? What are the components? What are the elements we need to do it? Product shot, copy, call to action. 3 of those elements, what are their priorities? Oh, okay, this is an artisan product, as I mentioned. That product shot's going to be P1. Value propositions P2. Maybe we don't even have a call to action. Conversely, you think about the USB sticks, product shot P3, P2, value proposition P1. So we have that priority. And lastly, we establish context. How do we adapt the conversation to the size of the arena we're operating in? If it's a 300 by 50 banner, if it's a full screen static interstitial, or if it's a multi-layered interactive playable, how do we go from that 6x6 room to the 12x12 room to the multi-room apartment and understand the principles that drive that conversation? Speaking of conversations, I'm hoping you've enjoyed this one. I'm hoping that sharing some of our principles has given some value. And again, whether you're a team, whether you're a creative, or whether you're someone who came in here through the NBA scores and you're still with me. P.S. Luka probably did great. Phenomenal player. He's going to win MVP, but we'll see. My hope is that you've taken value from this. And should there be any questions at all, I am more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for your fantastic topic. I guess if we will have any questions, our audience could ask you directly and add you in LinkedIn. I would like to thank you once again. And I hope to see you during our next Hyper Games conferences and events.
It's always my pleasure. Thank you so much, Stacy. It was great seeing you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.